All right, welcome to the second part of our tutorial series on setting up Sincronia. So in this part, we're going to talk about how to set up Sincronia to do modern JavaScript. So there's a section in here called configuring your project. So by here, I mean Nuvolo Sincronia repo. And there's a lot of configuration stuff to talk about in here. But what we want to focus on for this part of the video is plugin configurations. So the way that plugins work with Sincronia is every time I save a file, Sincronia checks to see if there's any plugins associated with the kind of file that I'm saving. So when I configure Sincronia, I can tell it what kind of file to look for and what plugins to run on it. In our case, we want to affect any JavaScript files that we're saving to ServiceNow. So I want to be able to use modern JavaScript. And in order to use modern JavaScript, we're going to use a tool called Babel. It just so happens that Sincronia has a Babel plugin out of the box that we're going to use and leverage to write modern JavaScript in ServiceNow. So the first thing we need to do is do an npm install. So install -d. So this terminal is open in my Sincronia project that I had from the last part of this video. And we do @Sincronia/Babel plugin. Okay, so that's installed. And the next thing we need to do is open up sync.config.js. So in sync.config.js, we see several different options available to us. The one that we're particularly interested in is the rules section. The rules section is useful for setting up the plugins that we just talked about. So every rule has a few properties. One is a match. So a match is a regular expression that helps us when it basically runs on the file name. So if I want to match on JavaScript files, I want to do .js and then a $sign to mark the end of the string. Now, one thing to note is that client-side JavaScript already works with modern JavaScript. It's really ServiceNow's code that doesn't work. It's stuck on ES5. So maybe we want to have a differentiator between normal JS files and like ServiceNow's JavaScript files. So to do that, I'm going to basically invent a new extension, which is .sn.js. And what that allows me to do is say for any files that end in .sn.js, I want to run some certain plugins. So you can just specify plugins like that. And then each plugin is an object. And it has a name, which is the name of the module. So the plugin we're going to run is @Sincronia/Babel plugin. And it also has options. And we don't know what options we're going to use yet, so let's just save it. And if I were to run this, so if I do npx sync dev, and I rename this file to be .sn.js. And save. Okay, it looks like it pushed. So what happened? So I go to my instance, look at test3, nothing really happened. Why is that? Well, that's because Babel is meant for transforming code, but if you don't give it any options, it just basically takes your code exactly as it is. So we need to add some options here to make it transform our code in the way that we want. So there's a few things that we're going to have to install to make this happen. So let me stop Synchronia's dev mode. And we're going to install some modules. So we're going to do an npm install -D, and we're going to do @Sincronia Babel plugin, and we're going to install the Babel plugin called remove modules, and we're also going to install at Sincronia Babel preset ServiceNow. So these are two homegrown pieces that we made for Sincronia to make it work. And we're also going to install at Babel preset env. So Babel preset env is kind of the magic for transpiling modern JavaScript to older JavaScript. And we're going to be using that in our configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and install those. Okay, so those are installed. Now with those installed, we can set up our Babel config. So in the options here in our sync.config.js, we can provide two options. One is plugins, which is an array, and there's also presets, which is an array. So we're going to give it some plugins. So the first plugin we're going to add is at Sincronia /remove modules. And we're also going to give it in the presets, I'm going to give it at Sincronia /ServiceNow. And we're also going to give it, as a second one, we're going to give it an array instead of just a string, which is how you configure Babel presets. So the first part of the array is going to be at Babel /env. And the second part is going to be our configuration object. So in here, we're going to turn on some stuff, some options that make it work with ServiceNow really well. One is use built-ins. And we're going to set that to entry. And we're going to do targets. And we're saying Internet Explorer at version 10. And then we're also going to set an option called core.js. We're going to say we want to use version 3. So let me explain this really fast. So a Babel plugin, Babel configuration takes plugins and presets. Plugins run before presets. So you can see here I'm running the remove modules plugin first. And then after that, the presets run in reverse order. So the Babel env preset is going to run first, and then ServiceNow, the ServiceNow preset is going to work at the very end to clean up any code that we needed to clean up to make it work with ServiceNow. So it's important that you always have at Syncronia ServiceNow in the first of your presets if you're going to use it to push code to ServiceNow. And that being like ServiceNow server side specifically, like script includes and business rules. One thing that we need to install before we get going is core.js. So since we specified core.js in here, we need to add core.js version 3 in here. So I'm going to do npm install /D core.js. Okay, so now that that's installed, I think we should be good to go. So let's test it out. Let's run npx sync dev to start our dev mode. And let's use some modern JavaScript in here. So if I were to go in here and let's make a new function in here. Let's say like test func. Let's say function. And let's do var. Let's do let. Let's do let. Let r equal here, and then let's gs.info on. Let's put something in r. Let's put like 1. So let's do spread of r 2 3, and let's save that. You can see it pushed. So what happens when we push that? Okay, you can see it transformed some of our JavaScript here we're in GS-info, and instead of having our spread, it's doing concat. Let's just make sure it works. You can see there it goes, totally works. So that's cool, we can use some modern JavaScript now, but how far can we take it? Well, let's see, we're using prototype.js here, so what if we can just get rid of that? I want to do my own class. So I'm going to make a class named the same as my script include. That's important for script includes in ServiceNow. And I'm going to do a constructor here. Doesn't do anything. And then we're also going to do a test func again. And then let's do the same thing, gs.info. R, 2, 3. Let's save that. You can see our code looks quite a bit different now, but you know that happened before, so let's check to make sure it works. And it does. That's pretty cool, right? So let's say we're happy with that, but we want to have another class that extends this one. Let's try it. So let's rename test2 to script.sn.js. And let's do something else with it. Let's import our other class that we just made. So we're going to import test3, but we need to export it first to make it work. So we're going to do export default test3, and we're going to import test3 from test3 script.sn, and then we're going to say export default class test2 extends test3. So if I were just to save this, you can see it just built again in our console. So now if I switch out test3 with test2, we should get the same result because it extends, but we haven't overridden anything yet. Okay, so we're getting the same result. So what happens if I override the test function? Okay, so we got our slightly different version of that function in our class now. Let's save it. And then let's run it one more time. And you can see we extended our class, but we also overrode the method. So now we get our own new behavior. So it looks like our imports are working as well. That's pretty awesome. So you can see here now that we've got this Babel plugin running, we can write most modern JavaScript in here and use it in ServiceNow. Now there are some caveats to this. For example, if any methods that have been added to like the object primitive, so the object primitive is like the capital O object. So like, for example, there is a new method added called object.values, and that will not work here because ServiceNow doesn't allow us to extend the primitives that come like object or string. So any new methods that got added to those prototypes won't work in here. But most syntactical sugar like classes or spreading and arrow functions, let and const, those things will work and should work as expected for the most part. If you do find anything that's weird, you can always submit a issue at Sincronia, or you can even add a pull request if you're feeling bold or confident, and we would welcome any pull requests. With that, that is the end of the second part of our video. And in the next part of our video, we're going to be talking about how to set up Sincronia to work with TypeScript.